So the purpose of the quick check is to help me determine if I really think the machine is out of time or not. So let's say that I have a bunch of loops under my machine. That could be nothing to do with timing. It might only have to do with my tensions being wrong, or my thread came out of the top tension, or I didn't have my thread in the top tension. So I might not have any timing issue at all. So if I immediately go to timing and start changing things when it was not out of time, then I will throw it out of time and I'll create more problems than I started with. So we wanted to kind of get that visual check to see, is timing an issue or not? If it's an issue, we'll find it in the next step, because the next step, which we're introducing now, is going to be checking timing with the gauge. If it's out with a gauge, then we'll know for sure. Right now we just did a quick visual check, which is something that a lot of users might want to do just to see, is it timing or tensions. Now we're going to check. We've got our straight needle in still. We've made sure it's touching inside our sight stop hole. So we're going to go to bottom dead center. Ideally, we're going to rock our hand wheel so we feel and see when it's bottom dead center. So I have two senses. I'm feeling it and seeing it when it's at bottom dead center. So needle bar lowest position, bottom dead center. I'm going to add my clamp and my gauge, and I'm going to check this before I've loosened anything. So I'm not really changing anything. I'm still just checking. I want to make sure I have a problem before I go into it. Again, if we change the timing when we didn't need to, we're just going to cause ourselves more problems and not solve anything. So I want to take my 2.2 gauge. Most of the new gauges all say 2.2 on them. HQ loop lift 2.2 millimeters. I can slide that in. Now I'm a little tight, so I'm going to loosen this and think it down. I want a little bit of drag so I know that I don't have slop. I don't want to have this much. And I always want to gauge with the machined edge up, not down, because I can't tell if I'm doing this thickness or the entire thickness. I only want to use this much, so I'm going to gauge with that up, slide it in. Now once I've got that so it's nice and tight, I'm going to turn my hand wheel in direction of motion, the top down towards me when I'm on this side, at the top tension side. And when I rotate it, I want my hook now to come. Here's my needle. My hook's going to come behind it, but basically to the far edge. To see that, from here my needle's in the way of the hook. So I'm going to put my head inside the machine like this and look around, and I'm exactly flush like this. So that's where I want it. So that's good. Again, I can kind of take a little tool. I can push on the needle both ways, and I can see if it's really barely brushing down inside. So where I'm really looking is right there. And I can see that if I don't push on it, it's already touching. It has a hard sound. If I barely push on it, I'll see it flex the needle and I don't hear the hard sound anymore. Hear the difference? Okay. So this is actually timed very well, but now what we're going to do is we're going to show you if it weren't, what we'd have to do. We'd have to loosen our hook and do a bunch of steps to retime the machine. Once I've determined that I want to retime the machine, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to back off my stop finger so that I can accurately set my needle distance. Because I have a needle guard on the machine, the needle guard prevents my needle from hitting the hook. So I can have it too close and not hit, but I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the basket down. To do that, I need to either bring back my stop finger or remove it. Sometimes I can just loosen it. You can hear that was pretty tight. I loosen the screw. It's a 2.5 millimeter tool, and I can slide this out here, the stop finger. Retighten the stop finger. Notice I've kind of got the front of my machine hanging off the top of my tabletop so I can access this 2.5 screw head here. Now I can rotate my basket down. Now when the basket's down, it has a big opening right here. From here to here there's an opening. So the little stopper that catches on the stop finger is now at the bottom. I rotated it 180 degrees. And I'm wide open at the top now, so I can bring I'm going to hold on to my basket and see, if I don't hold on to my basket, it rotates with my hook. So I need to hold on to it lightly. And then I'm going to bring my hook point up. I'm going to bring my needle down, and I can see really clear now how close my needle is to my hook point right here. But to time the machine, let's say that it had slipped and it was all out. So what I want eventually is I want my hook point up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the two screws on the hook. Remember, there's one on each side of the flat. So I'm going to go in through my access hole on the top tension side. I'm going to loosen that a couple turns, but not too much. I don't want the screw to fall out and get lost. I'm going to hold on to the basket. I'm going to rotate it around to the other one on the other side of the flat. About right there, I have a second screw. Now, once I do that, my hook's really loose. I can actually wiggle it and get it to come all the way off. My stop finger's a little bit in the way. So let me just show you that. If I take my stop finger all the way out, first of all, you'll notice that the stop finger goes in and up. The stop finger has a little washer on it. My stop finger has a washer. That's my stop finger screw. And if I put that in, the bend has to go up like that. You can see it's a little bit bent up. And with that all the way out, I can go ahead and take my hook all the way out if I want, just to show you. So here's my hook assembly all the way out. Screw on each side of the flat. So now what I want to do is I'm going to put the hook in. I'm going to have the basket with the opening up. Now if I kind of hold my hook point up, that makes it easier for me to get it in the right place. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this on, then I'm going to slide my needle all the way to the lowest position again. Kind of wiggle it on there. Hook point up, opening up. Hang on to that, and now I'm going to lower the needle to the lowest position. So I'm going to do the same thing we did when we did our initial check. Bottom dead center, we're going to feel it and see it as low as it can go. If I'm sloppy with my bottom dead center, then I'll be sloppy with my timing setting. Then I'm going to carefully set my gauge. It's a little bit loose, so I'm just going to loosen it and think it up. I'm going to hold on to it. One more time, so that I have a nice little drag when I put that gauge in. So right there, I put my gauge in. You'll notice I have my 2.2 millimeter. Now this is where most people go wrong, is they'll go ahead and set the hook to the needle right there, but they forgot to turn it and take the gap out. Remember, when the needle's all the way down, there's no loop yet. And so this gauge is simulating the delay of the needle bar raising 2.2 millimeters. So I have to turn my hand wheel, watch my needle go up. My hook's not going to change because I haven't tightened it yet. So I go carefully till my clamp touches here on the bearing support. And now in that position, my hook is supposed to now be to the far edge of the needle. So now I'm going to set my hook to the far edge. Now it's pretty easy to adjust it this way. You can see, if you aim down in here, that my hook point is going way past the needle now. So the hard part is to set is the distance. So I'm going to bring the distance this way first to get my hook against the needle scarf, and then I'm going to rotate it so it's even with the far edge. Now, in order to not move my hook all around, I'm not going to use my straight tool. I'm going to use the Ballin tool. The Ballin tool allows me to go in on a little bit of an angle and to tighten my hook more easily. So I'm going to go through my front hole into my hook hole, for the first set screw, and it's right there. Then I'm going to use my trigger finger and my thumb. You'll notice I have my finger under here, kind of rests on the frame to give me some resistance against the adjustment. My thumb on top. I can accurately adjust like this. Index finger underneath, thumb on top. Bring it over till it's just even to the far edge and barely touching, because we want to lightly touch the scarf. Just carefully snug this so I don't roll it. I double check in here. I advanced it a hair too much. So again, now if I rest my hand on my frame, give me some resistance against the adjustment. I can roll it back just a hair, re-snug. I didn't have to start over. And I'm going to double check my needle distance. If I touch this, it barely moves. If I don't touch, it clunks. I want to have you hear this. It has a hard sound. If I barely touch it, now it doesn't. So that's my way to check that it's barely brushing. What I don't want is it to touch a lot and bend the needle every time it goes up and down. So now I have a second hole back here. Personally, I don't use it a lot. I might be able to go through this back hole, rotate my hook a little bit to tighten the back screw. But what I usually do is just take my clamp off, hold my basket, bring my other screw right to the front and go carefully through the front, just like I did the other screw. Snug it, trying not to roll it. Once I've got it snugged, notice I was kind of using this little part to leverage, and because of the ball end I could get it in there easy. Now this one's a little harder to line up, but I can go now into here with my, until I hear it click. Now what a lot of people, they won't get it in all the way and it didn't click, and so then they can't tighten it. Now I want to tighten this as tight as I can until I see this rotate, or because if I don't get this real tight it'll slip prematurely and it won't hold my timing. That's the second screw, back to the first screw. It's just right around in there. Again, I want to hear it kind of click and clunk in. Twist it till I can't get it any tighter because I'm twisting my blade. You can actually see this spiral and twist as I do it. So now it's tightened, my basket's not re-engaged. So what I'm going to do now is double check. So I'm going to go bottom dead center one more time. So I've done this, I checked it before I timed it, then I checked it to time it. Now I'm doing it a third time to make sure it didn't slip when I adjusted it. Bottom dead center, same way as before. Gauge, get it nice and snug so I have a little drag. Nice drag, a little bit too much. Rotate it direction motion till it touches. Make sure, see how this wants to turn if I don't hold it. And then I want to make sure it comes around right to the far edge. Double check this. And we're done. So we've already tightened the screws all the way and we've double checked. So the last thing we need to do is check needle height. So in that same position, my bottom of my hook point is 1 millimeter above the top of the eye as it gets there. There's a good picture that shows that. Now the only thing we have left, if our needle height is wrong, needle height can be set through this front hole, but there's a coupler, and so you never do that without holding onto the needle bar. So you would do hold the needle bar, we loosen the screw, adjust. When we're done, this front hole is supposed to be radially adjusted straight out to the front. I just must caution you though, the first thing an inexperienced technician will do is set needle bar height. 99% of the time that's why it's wrong. It almost never is wrong because it slipped. It's always because somebody changed it. So very seldom will you have to adjust needle height unless somebody else changed it and did it wrong. So you shouldn't really need to adjust needle bar height. If you do, Make sure this is to the front. Hold on to it while you adjust it. Just barely slightly wiggle it, and then retighten your screw through this front hole here. The last thing then is to re-engage the stop finger. Remember, the bend has to go up. We're going to go in. I'm going to get my needle up out of the way. In that position, I can rotate my basket around so that my notch is now at the top again. And this is easier to do when you can kind of put it up and see. I need to show you one more thing. There's a machined edge underneath here, is to keep the stop finger positioned and reinforced. So as I go to do my final setting here, I want to push my stop finger against that machined edge. I don't want it like this. I want it all the way over to this machined edge. My thread escapement after the loop is formed has to escape here. Right here, if you look down here now, I'm too close, so my thread's going to wrap around here and get stuck because I'm too tight. I need to slide it out a little bit. So if you can see how close that is now, and this is kind of flush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen that and increase my stop finger gap so that this end of my stop finger is kind of right even with that notch. The setting is actually 0.8 to 1 millimeter. Is what we want it to be. Push it against the machined edge. Retighten my screw. Tighten it until my blade flexes really tight. Remember how it snapped when we undid it? And now if you look down, you'll see we have a nice gap so my thread can escape. After I've reinstalled my stop finger, the last thing I need to do is to reinstall the needle plate with my countersinks up. Because it's symmetrical, it doesn't matter if it's this way or this way. So I put it on. Then I use my flathead screws. I can kind of spin them in by hand pretty good. Then I can take my longer screwdriver at a slight angle, snug it, get this one snug, then tighten. And once it's tightened, it won't turn anymore. And that one's tightened. And then we're done. We're timed. All right, so we've gone over customer timing of the machine. At first, we talked about the theory. Kind of what we were going to adjust. Then we talked how to quickly check visually to see if it looked like the machine was out of time. If we're skipping stitches, usually we see long stitches, gaps between the stitch where one stitch is really long with some extra holes punched in the fabric. If we have a bunch of loops underneath, often people think that the loops underneath means their timing is out, but most of the time, 90% or more of the time, it's the tensions are wrong, or the thread's not in the top tension at all. So after we did the quick visual check, we did a check with a gauge. We saw the machine was, in this case, correct, but we threw it out, and then we adjusted it with a gauge. When we're all done, the machine should sew nicely. If timing wasn't out and we went in and adjusted it and we didn't adjust it accurately, then we would create more issues than we solve. So that's why we spend so much time on checking to see if the machine is really out of time before we adjust it, because often it may not be out. But if it is out, it'll be out quite a bit because something probably slipped. What makes timing go out is an ugly event. We ran over our ruler, we thread locked the machine and jammed it, and then the hook slipped. And the hook is actually designed to slip so we can adjust it more easily at the hook. and to prevent the hook from being damaged, because a new hook is $200. So we don't really want the hook to get broken. We want it to slip. So when something ugly happens, the hook slips. So that's timing the machine. Hopefully with the video and the documentation and the pictures, it will make sense to you. Thank you.